The Journey to the Moon. On August 5, 1930, a little boy named Neil Armstrong was born in a small town called Wapakoneta, Ohio. Neil loved airplanes and flying more than anything. When he was just 6 years old, he took his very first airplane ride, and he was hooked. Flying high above the ground made him feel so excited, and he dreamed of being a pilot one day. As Neil grew older, he worked hard in school and kept thinking about airplanes. He studied all about how they worked, and he read every book he could find about flying. By the time he was 16, Neil earned his pilot's license. Before he even had his license to drive a car, Neil loved the feeling of soaring through the sky, looking down at the tiny houses and fields below. When Neil finished high school, he went to college to learn even more about planes and space. He studied engineering, which is the science of building things. While he was in college, Neil also became a test pilot. A test pilot flies new airplanes to make sure they work just right. Neil was very brave because some of these planes could be tricky to fly, but he stayed calm and focused. After college, Neil joined NASA, which is the American Space Agency. NASA wanted to learn more about space and even send people to the moon. Neil was excited. He had always dreamed of going higher and higher, so space was the perfect place for him. Neil trained with other astronauts, learning how to live and work in space. He practiced flying spaceships, floating in zero gravity, and even practiced walking in space. Then came a very special mission called Apollo 11. NASA chose Neil to be the commander, or leader, of this mission. He would fly with 2 other astronauts, Buzz Aldrin and Michael Collins, to the moon. The Apollo 11 mission was a big event. People all over the world were watching and waiting to see if they would make it to the moon. On July 16, 1969, Neil and his crew climbed into the spacecraft. With a loud roar, the rocket blasted off, pushing them up, up, up into space. After 3 days of flying, they finally saw the moon up close. It looked like a big, gray ball covered in craters. Neil and Buzz got ready to land on the moon while Michael stayed in the main spacecraft to wait for them. Neil and Buzz climbed into a smaller spaceship called the Lunar Module, which they called Eagle. Slowly, the Eagle lowered down, getting closer and closer to the moon's surface. Then, on July 20, 1969, they finally landed. Neil took a deep breath and opened the door. Carefully, he stepped down the ladder. As his foot touched the ground, he said, "That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind." Neil Armstrong was the first person ever to walk on the moon. As Neil looked around, he saw gray dust and rocks everywhere. The moon was quiet and still, with no air, wind, or sound. Buzz soon joined Neil, and together, they set up experiments, took pictures, and even planted an American flag on the moon's surface. They collected rocks to bring back to Earth so that scientists could study them. Neil and Buzz spent about 2 hours walking on the moon. Then it was time to go back. They climbed back into the Eagle, launched off the moon, and joined Michael in the main spaceship. After a long journey back, they finally returned to Earth. When they landed, people all over the world cheered. Neil and his crew were heroes. After his moon landing, Neil Armstrong became very famous. People wanted to hear him talk about his journey and how it felt to walk on the moon. Neil was proud of his mission, but he was also humble. He continued to work as a teacher and shared his love of space with students. He encouraged kids to dream big and explore. On August 25, 2012, Neil Armstrong passed away, but people still remember him as a brave astronaut who took a giant leap for all of us. He showed us that with hard work and bravery, we can reach for the stars and beyond.